People in my small town tend to disappear when they venture too far out past the city limits, the abandoned farmland that sits between our town and the Florida Everglades to be exact. This farmland, haunted farmland some would tell you, has been off limits for the past 15 years. The official story goes that a little over 15 years ago, a farmer disturbed an ancient aquifer while drilling a well. The water in the aquifer broke free and opened up a sinkhole that swallowed him and his wife. The unofficial story, the one told late at night in hushed tones, goes that the farmer disturbed an ancient Native American burial ground while digging this well, and brought down a curse upon himself, his family, and the entire town. Most people in the town know someone who vanished after traveling too far outside the town. Curiosity is dangerous. Over the past 15 years, our small town has learned to mind our own business, keep off the old farmland, and no one gets hurt. Every so often, the state police will roll through, usually asking about hunters or campers that disappeared. They never find anything, and eventually lose interest. By the time they were 16, most guys in my town claimed to have spent a night out on the old farm. Most were lying about it, but no 16-year-old boy would admit that the old farm scared them shitless. So the charade continued through the years. Guys would gang up and bully those who they suspected had never been onto the farm. It usually ended up being me, the one that the other guys would gang up on like a pack of wolves. I was the only guy in my high school that was upfront about never visiting the abandoned farm. It was my family that used to own the old farm, my father who disappeared along with my mother. Only 3 years old at the time, I moved in with my grandmother afterwards. I've always been regarded by the town as an outsider, someone to be pitied. Though they would never say it aloud, I suspected that the town viewed me as responsible for the disappearances. High school was hell. The students, even the teachers, treated me as if I were a leper. Taunts, jibes, and the occasional pushes and punches followed me throughout the school day. By my senior year of high school, the cruelest bullies perfected their art. A group of them would see me approaching and begin to loudly discuss the last time they had snuck out onto the abandoned farm. They'd talked about how easy it was, and that only a true coward would be afraid of the farm. Then they would all turn to me and ask why I hadn't been out there. Their taunts had no limits, their cruelty only constrained by their creativity. Everything changed Halloween night of my senior year of high school. Junior Ravner, the captain of the baseball team, rounded up his buddies and hatched a plan. They had a Halloween prank that would go down in town history. Well, they were right. The town will never forget what happened that night. As usual, I was their target of choice. I can understand why. I had no friends to back me up. The teachers, hell, pretty much the whole town hated my family. No one would come to my defense. In fact, they all enjoyed a laugh at my expense. The baseball team went to state finals last year, so Junior and his cronies could get away with anything. I have to give them credit. They had put a lot of effort into planning their prank. They had the audacity to kidnap me from the front steps of my grandmother's house on Halloween. I answered the door, expecting to see a few kids in costumes their parents had bought from Walmart. Instead, I was greeted by 3 giants wearing grotesque clown masks. The tallest clown, whose clown mask was done to look like Pennywise from the movie It, pulled me out of my house and pushed me down the front stoop and onto my lawn. My fight-or-flight instincts kicked in, and of course I tried to run, but there's no running from Junior Ravner, a top University of Florida recruit. He caught up to me easily and knocked me over, giving me a good kick in the stomach as he taunted me, cowering like the dog you are, before bending down to put a burlap sack over my head. I could smell the beer on their breath as they shoved me into the trunk of their Ford SUV. "We're gonna scare the coward out of you tonight, boy," said one of Junior's cronies. Probably Todd Ripper, judging from the Mississippi drawl in his voice. The others in the car snickered, and Junior said, "Todd, pass me a beer." A cooler opened somewhere in the front of the SUV, and soon the SUV was filled with the sickly sweet smell of cheap beer. It didn't take a genius to guess where we were going. Life in this town revolves around the old abandoned farm, even though no one talks about it and rarely ventures close to it. The bumpiness of the ride told me that the SUV had turned off the main road and onto the neglected farm road that led to the main farmhouse. After another 5 minutes, the SUV had pulled to a stop, and Junior and his friend jumped out of the SUV, whooping and hollering. "Get him out of there, boys," said Junior. The trunk opened, and a pair of strong hands grabbed me by the shoulders and yanked me out of the trunk and onto the soft ground. I slowly stood up and started to take my hood off before being punched in the stomach. "What the hell you think you're doing, you yellow-bellied prick?" chuckled Todd as he pulled me to my feet again. "Do what you're told and maybe we won't post the video of this on YouTube," said Junior. Well, my reputation in this town can't really get any worse, so that's an idle threat. I did find it a little funny, though, that bullying has gone high-tech. I stood as still as possible, hoping to avoid giving them another reason to hit me. I resigned myself to a night of humiliation and discomfort. Do what they say, and don't make them angry, I thought to myself. Maybe I could run away if they got too drunk or became distracted. Junior said, "Okay, let's get going. Don't have all night here," and roughly pushed me forward. I obliged and slowly put one foot forward, and then the other, carefully taking each step so as to not trip and fall. "Come on, you wuss, walk faster," said a new voice that I didn't recognize. "Can't see where I'm going. I'd be able to go faster if I didn't have this hood on," I said softly so as to not give them another reason to punch me again. Someone grabbed my hood and ripped it off, taking a few of my hairs with it. I looked up to see Chris Hepley, my next-door neighbor and my best friend throughout elementary school, holding the hood. He had stopped talking to me in the 8th grade, an age when popularity and girls win out over childhood friendships. Just as I had suspected, they had taken me to the old abandoned farm. The abandoned farmhouse stood in front of us, creepily illuminated by the fog lights of Junior's SUV. Graffiti covered the walls of the house, and broken glass lay below shattered windows. Crushed beer cans and empty liquor bottles lay strewn about the overgrown lawn. Chris dropped the hood and said, "What the hell are you looking at, punk?" My nose wrinkled at the smell of his beer-soaked breath. Chris bent over and opened the cooler that Todd had taken out of the truck. Chris picked out a beer and handed it to me. "Here, drink one of these. There still might be hope for you," he said. They all laughed, and Todd held up his phone. "Let me get this on video. Baby's first beer. Chug it now!" I obliged them, cracking open the can, tilting it up, and slowly drinking down the watery beer. "Amateur hour. Let us show you how it's done," said Todd. They all picked 2 beers each and chugged them in quick succession. Todd picked up another beer and was about to hand it to me when Junior cursed and said, "Why the hell are we letting this clown drink with us? What happened to the plan? We can't let him get off this easy." Chris shifted uneasily and said, "I didn't think you were serious, man. He could get hurt, or worse." Todd giggled and said with a slur in his voice, "Ooh, you trying to protect your kindergarten bestie now? Man up or go home. The road is that way," said Junior as he pointed over the shoulder with his thumb. Chris looked down at the ground, but didn't say anything. I knew I was in trouble, and that I didn't want to stick around to find out what Junior had planned for me. "Todd, get the rope out of the truck. Let's get going. I don't want to be here all night. I want to get over to that party before the keg runs out," said Junior. Todd stumbled over to the back of the SUV in a drunken stupor, but couldn't figure out how to open the trunk. "Damn it!" muttered Junior through clenched teeth as he stomped over to the back of the SUV. I knew that was my only chance. I didn't want to stick around and find out what Junior had in store for me. I slowly began to back away from Chris, who looked at me but said nothing. I silently thanked him, spun around, and sprinted off into the darkness. 30 seconds later, I heard a loud curse and knew that Junior had learned about my escape. I had to find somewhere to hide since there was no way I could outrun them. The problem is, there isn't any place to hide on a farm. Wide open land surrounded the farmhouse, which I was running away from. Junior tackled me 2 minutes later at the edge of the small pond where my father had tried to dig the well so many years ago. Junior pushed my face into the soft ground and twisted my arms behind my back. "Give me that rope now, Todd," said Junior. Todd, breathing heavily from the run, looked like he was going to throw up, all that beer sloshing around in his stomach, I guess. Junior tied my hands behind my back tightly, the nylon rope digging into my wrists and cutting off circulation in my hands. He held the other end of the rope in his hand. He gave the rope a jerk and said, "You're not going anywhere now. Got you on a leash like the yellow-bellied dog you are." I stood facing Junior and Todd and saw Chris walking up from behind them. He was about 15 feet away when the earth beneath his feet lowered a few inches, and a pale hand with blackened fingernails reached up through the damp soil and grabbed onto his ankle and jerked downwards. Chris screamed and jumped forwards, managing to free his ankle from the grasp of whatever lay beneath him. Junior looked back and said, "What the hell is wrong with you?" "Something grabbed my foot back there. I think my ankle sprained," said Chris, wincing as he gingerly prodded his ankle. Junior said, "You're starting to sound more and more like this coward. You snagged your foot on a root. You've had too many beers." Two grotesque hands again rose from the ground and grabbed both of Chris's ankles and began to pull Chris down into a widening hole. Chris screamed and tried to rip his legs free, all the while sinking deeper into the soil. Junior and Todd sprinted forward and each grabbed one of Chris's hands. "Pull!" yelled Junior. Chris's screams intensified, now waist deep in the ground. His eyes bulged as blood began to dribble from his mouth. "Todd, pull, damn it!" screamed Junior with a crazed look in his eye. Together they pulled and brought Chris back out of the narrow hole that had formed. His left leg was broken, and his right leg had what looked like jagged bite marks running up and down it. I stood up and took a few steps forward. They had pulled Chris out of a small tunnel with smooth walls that went down about 4 feet before taking a 90-degree turn towards the old farmhouse. "Use this rope to stop the bleeding from his legs," I said. Chris, with eyes glazed over, lay moaning on the ground, and Junior looked at me for a moment before untying my hands and wrapping the rope tightly around Chris's legs. "Todd, you got your phone on you?" asked Junior. I think it's back in the truck," slurred Todd. "Mine too. Run back and get them. Bring them back to me. I'll wait here and watch over Chris." Todd hesitated for a moment, looking down at Chris and then off at the SUV in the distance. Junior cursed and threw his empty beer can at Todd. "What the hell are you waiting for? Get going!" Todd zigzagged across the open field, hopping, skipping, and doubling back every few feet, trying to avoid whatever horror lurked beneath him. He finally reached the SUV, and a few minutes later began hopping and skipping his way back towards us. Todd was about 10 feet away when he abruptly disappeared. Junior, his face ghost white, said to me, "Go see what happened." I took 3 long strides forward and saw that Todd had disappeared into a hole that looked identical to the hole they had pulled Chris out of. It went down about 4 feet and then veered off towards the old farmhouse. Junior looked down at Chris laying on the ground and then said to me, "Walk towards the truck slowly. I'll follow behind you. I'll break your leg if you try to run and leave you here. You hear me?" "Sure," I murmur, and then a little bit more loudly, "What about Chris?" Chris had regained consciousness and began to plead with Junior to take him with us. Junior refused, saying to Chris, "You're safer here. Trust me on this, man." "No, no, no!" screamed Chris, and then looked at me and said with a look of pure terror on his face, "You have to listen to me. They're coming back for me. I can hear them underneath us, listening, waiting until I'm alone again." Junior looked at Chris and then turned to me and shoved me towards the SUV. "Start walking, slowly." I began to walk forwards, concentrating on each step. I could hear Chris behind us begging for us to come back, and then nothing. I didn't dare turn around to look, but heard Junior curse and knew that Chris was now 4 feet beneath us. "Hurry up and get to the truck so we can get out of here together," Junior said as he gave a hard shove. I doubted that Junior would take me with him, would probably leave me here to suffer the same fate as Chris and Todd. I knew, though, that running off on my own was the worst thing I could do, so I decided to go along with Junior and hoped that an opportunity for escape would present itself. We were a few steps away from the SUV when I felt the ground beneath my feet shift, rise half an inch, and then rapidly sink. I jumped backward, away from the SUV, just as a huge hole formed that swallowed the entire vehicle into a bottomless pit 30 feet across. "My truck! It got my damn truck!" screamed Junior with more emotion than when Chris and Todd disappeared. He turned on me and punched me in the side of the head. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't run away from us, if your family hadn't bought this farm, you're gonna pay for this." He grunted as he punched me in the mouth, this time knocking me to the ground. I turned over, spitting blood out of my mouth, and kicked him as hard as I could in the groin, and immediately sprinted into the old farmhouse. "I'm going to kill you!" Junior yelled after me with a hysterical laugh. I knew that he would kill me if he got a hold of me, so I sprinted through the abandoned house, looking for the door to the basement. If I could find someplace to hide to wait him out, then I might be able to get out of this alive. The first door I tried led into a closet, but the second one opened into the pitch-black basement. I hurtled down the wooden steps, hoping the rotten wood would hold up under my weight, and heard Junior crash to the front door of the farmhouse. I felt around the basement, searching for a good place to hide myself. I found a small alcove near the old coal chute and draped an old canvas over my body as I sat huddled in the corner of the basement. The footsteps above me stopped, and I knew that Junior had found the door to the basement. The steps to the basement began to moan under the weight of Junior, and a sharp crack accompanied by a loud curse told me that one of the rotten steps had buckled under Junior's weight. My eyes adjusted to the small amount of moonlight shining into the basement through the boarded-up windows. The faint outline of a limping Junior came into sight, one hand out in front of him as he blindly felt around. In the other hand, he held what looked like a crowbar. He called out, "Why are you hiding? I just want to talk. I know how we can get out of here if we work together." I watched Junior hobble across the basement and kept deathly silent, looking for a chance to sprint up the stairs and out of the farmhouse. My heart missed a beat when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye on the other side of the basement. In the darkness, I could see two black figures crawl out a hole in the wall and pull two bodies out of the hole behind them, which hit the floor like a bag of concrete. Junior twirled around towards the sound, crowbar raised high overhead. "I know that's you, you damn coward!" One of the bodies on the floor moaned and gasped. "Junior, they ate my eyes. They ate them. Help me, please, please!" I ripped the canvas off and sprinted up the stairs, careful to avoid the broken step and praying that the others would hold up. I reached the top of the staircase, slammed the door behind me, and locked the door. I soon heard footsteps pounding up the stairs and watched as the doorknob rattled. I knew I should run away while the creatures below were occupied, but morbid curiosity kept my eyes glued to the door. "Hey, open the door! They're at the bottom of the stairs! Oh God, they're horrible! Disgusting! You should have seen what they did to Chris and Todd! Please!" I stood there, silent. Junior cursed and drove the crowbar through the wooden door again and again until there was a hole large enough to fit his hand through. He reached through and placed his hands on the lock. His hand spasmed, and a sickening crunch was followed by an ear-splitting scream. His hand pulled back through the hole, unlocking the door as it passed the lock. The door swung open slowly, and Junior came into view. Blood gushed down one side of his face. A large bite mark was where his left eye had been. He took a step forward, looking at me with remaining eye, until a rotting hand with sharp black fingernails wrapped around his ankle and jerked him back into the basement. The basement door closed with a loud bang, which awoke me from my trance. I sprinted out of the farmhouse and back towards the main road, shutting out the shrill scream rising out of the basement and ignoring the fact that the grotesque hand that grabbed Junior's ankle wore the same turquoise ring that I had seen my father wearing in old photographs.